we're going to do this class in the way of a timeline. You know, like what people normally do, which part of the time. And that way we can kind of go through it as an order. I'll try and make it as interesting as possible, but it is pretty much the same as every year, except for the obvious big difference, which is that we have Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, is on Shabbat, is on Shabbos. This is not very common, and the way it falls out, it can happen like, you know, they call them like the London buses. None of them come, and then they all come at the same time. So it could be that it happens oftenly, like we had it last 4 years ago in 2021, and we have it now. But after this, it's not happening for another 20 years, till 2045. On average, it happens 11 times out of every 100 years. So we will get to that, and we'll explain the differences between Pesach, Erev Pesach on Shabbos versus Erev Pesach regular years, and everything else that goes into it, including everything that can make it easy for us to get ready for Pesach. So the first rule is to divide and conquer. Whenever we're talking about preparation for Pesach, you have to know what do we have to do and how we're going to do it. Now, first things first, get a calendar for your shul. Here's hours, print it out, and that way you'll be able to know when does Pesach start, when is B'dikas Chametz tonight. This year it's earlier. When is the burning Chametz? When is it? That way you can be ready and prepared for everything. There are many, many good guides. I found one this year. It's called, if you can see, First Time Making Pesach. This is great. It's not really only for first timers making Pesach, but it's a resource for anybody that just wants to make a timeline. Like, what do I have to do? I'm going to clean my house, and what do I have to do when I clean my house? It doesn't go into too much detail, but just tells you an overview. Shopping, Kashering, switching over, which is when we switch over from being Chametz in the house to be completely ready for Pesach, and then how Erev Pesach looks. So we'd very much encourage everybody. I'm going to put, I'm going to try to see if I can put this in the chat. I can share my screen so you can see what this looks like. 1 second. But it's basically just step by step, and it's this idea of, like, you know, divide and conquer. Know what we're going to do, when we're going to do it. This is the resource, and it's like First Time Making Pesach, the guide for the rest of us, the schedule, clean the house. It's got some bullet points, things which are acceptable for Pesach, which you don't need. And this is like the OU guide, which everybody should be mandated reading, but it's just much simpler. It's just an overview of how to map out getting ready for Pesach. Okay, so all these things, by the way, you can find on our website, which is on dertikva.org/Pesach. If you go down the page a little bit, you'll see it says Passover guides. So right over here, it's got everything you need. Just need to refresh the page because I put some extra guides over here. But it's everything that you need. These guides, if you're feeding your pets, we'll see in a second, like how do you feed, you know, does your pet need to eat? Everything is written over there. Yeah. Now, here you have the overview. So anything I reference right now is going to be linked over there, so you can always get over there. dertikva.org/Pesach, or Passover will get you to the same place. If you go down to guides, that will appear. So, you have to make dates for when we're going to clean, right? When we're going to kasher. So let's say you say, this week we're going to clean. And then the beginning of next week we're going to kasher in order that we can get ready and cook for Pesach, and then we'll be cooking for Pesach. And then when are we going to get ready for the Seder? You basically reverse engineer it. Right now, Pesach is about 12 days away. You know, we've got this Erev Pesach day, which doesn't really count. And you reverse engineer it to make sure that we're going to be ready in time, what we're going to do each day. Today I'm going to do the bedrooms, then I'm going to do the kitchen. It's going to take me the next 2 days, and then that's how we're going to map it all out. Now, I just also want to recommend before we start, the CRC have an amazing new app, which has a Passover section. You can search anything, toothpaste, salmon. I want to know if I can buy salmon in Costco without, you know, a kosher Pesach. Search up in the app. Toothpaste, cosmetics, whatever you have a question about, you put over there, and it'll tell you, can you have it, can you not? Let's say, for example, the salmon. You can buy in Costco. Just rinse it off before you use it, because, you know, there might be a crumb on it. It's not going to tell you the reason, but it'll tell you the halacha. Toothpaste, it'll say, well, it's better to have recommended with a hechsher. As we'll see later on, there are more brands than you think that are approved for Pesach toothpaste. We'll get to that in a bit. We'll mention it briefly. Did you check up sugar? Does sugar need to have kosher to Pesach? Sugar is actually a very interesting one. When the OU guide came out 2 months ago, they already printed it. They shipped it to us a month ago. It said sugar needs kosher to Pesach. They changed that guidance. Last month, they changed the guidance. They took down the webpage that spoke about Pesach. They said sugar's still okay, like in previous years, without kosher Pesach. Pure, not the powdered sugar. Pure cane sugar is still okay. And if you check the CRC, they say it doesn't need. If you look at the Star K, it says it doesn't need. So look at these resources. You can download the PDF. You can press Control F and search these pages. Be resourceful to be able to know. And the easiest way to access these resources is via the app. If you go to the app and you look at them, you can easily search any product and it'll tell you. And obviously, if you can't find anything, or let's say it says it needs a hechsher, you can't find it in Charleston, South Carolina, give me a call. That's what I'm here for. So, Brett, very briefly, introduction. So what is this all about? This preparation for Pesach. Why is it so intense, Because Chametz effectively becomes our arch enemy. And for that reason, this Yom Tov, it has so many details. And why is it important? So we know that the minutiae of Chametz, whether it be the size of it or the laws of Pesach, they're very, very important. They matter. They hold the whole Pesach together. You can't just come to Seder Night without preparation, with Chametz around the house, and sit there and eat a bite of matzah and say you did Pesach. You didn't do any of Pesach. So it holds it all together. You can't neglect them and you can't negate it. We also don't want to be so consumed by it that it makes it into a stressful time. So that's what we have to figure out how to balance these two. How to do it fully, but without getting stressed. That's what I'm here for today. That's why some people get confused. When they do Pesach cleaning, they get confused with spring cleaning. And we'll see in a bit, spring cleaning is way different than Pesach cleaning. In fact, in most cases, more difficult. If you're dusting on top of your ceiling fan, that's spring cleaning. That's not Pesach cleaning. And there's a much deeper meaning behind Chametz. Chametz represents my inflated ego, my personality, my insecurities, my procrastination, whatever bad traits I may have. And when I get rid of it, that is me bettering myself as a human. That's me getting ready for Pesach in the proper way. So that's a deeper meaning behind the prohibition of Chametz. Without going into too much detail about where it comes from, the Torah itself mentions multiple mitzvahs and multiple isurim, prohibitions in the Torah about Chametz. Number one, positive commandment to get rid of Chametz. Number two, a positive commandment to eat matzah instead of Chametz. Number three, a positive commandment got to do with Pesach, which is to tell the story of leaving Mitzrayim on Seder Night. Now the negative prohibitions, there's 5 of them. You're not allowed to eat Chametz from Erev Pesach day. You're not allowed to eat Chametz on Pesach. That is, the punishment is kares, one gets cut off, God forbid. Number 3, Chametz is forbidden in a mixture, which is unique. Not most forbidden foods are not forbidden, not included in the main prohibition, not a separate one. And the fourth negative prohibition, the fourth lav, is you're not allowed to see chametz that you own. And the fifth, that means you can go to a store, you can see chametz over there, you can't see chametz that you own. And the fifth is you're not allowed to own chametz. Now, chametz, as we mentioned, is unique. It's prohibited in a mixture. It's also unique because you're not allowed to own it. I'm allowed to own pork, but I'm not allowed to own chametz. We have a positive commandment to get rid of it. There's no positive commandment to get rid of shrimp, but there's a positive commandment to get rid of chametz. And similarly, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Most prohibitions, meat and milk that was cooked, you're not allowed, but most prohibitions, most allowing you're allowed to benefit from. And the hardest part about chametz and why we're here mainly is because it's asa b'masher. Even a tiny crumb of chametz is prohibited on Pesach, and that's why it can get stressful. We're here to make sure it doesn't get stressful. So how do we get rid of chametz? We do 3 different things. Number 1, we nullify it. We say, I want to get rid of all chametz. I don't even own it anymore. I'm giving up ownership of it. We do this one time beginning after searching for chametz, and one time after just before the last time when you're allowed to own chametz. Now, the problem is, if I have a bottle of whiskey right next to me, and I'm going to say, I don't own it, and then I hope to get it back after Pesach, I'm not really giving up ownership. And therefore, the sages said, we also have to search for chametz. Bedikas chametz. This is cleaning and searching for chametz. It's a search and destroy mission. And finally, selling chametz. Selling chametz is a relatively new, 1,000 years ago method that they started doing when people had these big whiskey collections and these merchants, they couldn't get rid of it for Pesach. That's why we do. So we do all three. We nullify, we search, and we sell. If one finds chametz on Pesach, you're not allowed to give it to the neighbor. You're not allowed to feed it to the dog. You're not allowed to benefit from it. You can't even use it as a doorstopper. You have to flush it down the toilet immediately. And on Yom Tov and on Shabbos, it's actually muktzah. You're not allowed to move it. So you cover it in a way that nobody's going to touch it. So long story short, chametz becomes our worst enemy. So what is chametz? You may say, oh, obviously it's bread, it's cookies. Now those are the obvious types because it's made from the 5 grains, wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. It was in the process of baking, of cooking, of making for more than 18 minutes with flour and water became chametz. Now, the problem is there's less known examples. For example, one that not many people know, or some people don't know, is Play-Doh. The kids' toy Play-Doh. It's made out of flour and water and a couple more ingredients, and it's proper chametz. Now you might say it's not food. Happens to be Play-Doh is edible because they know that kids eat it, so they make it. They don't advise eating it, but it's edible. So Play-Doh is proper chametz. You have to sell it or get rid of it for Pesach. Just an example of sometimes you wouldn't think of something being chametz. We'll get to other examples later on. Flour itself, you may say, oh, it's got no water in it. I'm going to make sure it doesn't touch water, but processed flour touches liquid nowadays. Most processed flour in the processing phase. And therefore it's considered to be chametz, besides the fact that if you keep flour around, even one drop of water will make it into full-blown chametz, and therefore we don't touch or use or even own flour over Pesach, and we use alternatives like potato flour. Okay? Still, flour is not called chametz mamish, it's not called actual chametz, and therefore even those that don't sell real chametz on Pesach, they're allowed to sell flour. So, now any food that's not edible, right? That means a dog wouldn't eat it. It's not considered chametz. It's called chametz noiksha. It's a dog won't eat it, and therefore it's not considered chametz. You don't have to get rid of it. So, for example, there may be a hamantash underneath a drawer upstairs from when your grandchild visited 7 years ago. Well, that's most likely completely moldy and inedible, and therefore it's not an issue. This helps us in the search, as we'll see in a bit. Now, kitnios, we'll just mention very briefly. Ashkenazim took upon themselves non-chametz produce, which legumes and things which could be made to look like flour, for 2 reasons. Number 1, there were flours mixed in sometimes, and number 2, because it can be made to look like chametz, and therefore they forbade it. Kitnios is not chametz, therefore someone who's sick can have kitnios, a baby can have kitnios. You can eat a Sephardi who they didn't take on this custom. They can have kitnios in their house, and if they come to Ashkenazi's house, they just have to know what's kitnios, what's not kitnios. Some are strict not even to use vessels that were made for kitnios. Now, another example is you can feed your pet kitnios. And talking about pets is very interesting that people often don't think about. What is my dog going to eat on Pesach? Because you're not allowed to benefit from chametz. This could be full-blown chametz. And many, I would say most, but I'm not sure, but potentially even most, a cat and dog and pet food can have flour and water, can literally be grains. You can see wheat is often the first ingredient that comes up. And therefore, by the way, you see an example, it's more, I can feed my dog pork, but I can't feed my dog chametz on Pesach, so you see it's even stricter. So that is why I would encourage you to get the guide. It's also on our website. The Star K have a fantastic guide. It's a couple of pages long. Every single pet you could imagine, all the different brands, they went through them, did an incredible service. Whether you have a dog, a fish, a turtle, a bearded dragon, a bird, a guinea pig, a rabbit, they have different foods that you can feed them that don't, and a Q&A, that don't have chametz inside them. They might have kitnios, but they don't have chametz, and therefore you can feed them. This is very important. You're not allowed to benefit. It's one of the negative prohibitions in the Torah. You're not allowed to benefit from chametz on Pesach. Now, we're going to go through a timeline. The first thing you should do, you could do this already now, is sell your chametz. If you're traveling, that means you're going to be out of the house before Wednesday night. There's an interesting thing where we also do another sale that we rent out your property to a non-Jew. This says that you don't need to search your house for chametz on Wednesday night before Pesach. On Thursday night before Pesach. So make sure you get that into me on Wednesday night. That way we can sell the chametz on Thursday and also rent out your place. But that's only for people that are traveling. For most people, just make sure you got the sale form, either digitally, online. You can fill it in quickly at dortikva.org/Chametz, Chametz, or you can fill it in a print. But the main thing is you get it to us, we sell the Chametz for you, and that way you should we absolve ourselves from the prohibition of owning Chametz. It is recommended and advised, and we actually instructed to put the Chametz away. You can't have a loaf of bread in front of you and say, I sold it. No, it should be in cupboards, and we mark it. And we tell the non-Jew when we sell it, you should know we're marking, not everybody, but most people, many people are going to mark the places that they've sold their Chametz. So if you want to go inside the house and take some of that Chametz, you can see where it's marked. So it's better to put it in a cupboard, and it's even better to mark it. That way, it is completely away and sold for Pesach. We actually also rent out the place and the area where the Chametz is. This is all part of the way the sale works. So, in terms of the timeline, you can do that already now. You can do the sale. But the next thing is the cleaning. But what are we looking for when we look for Chametz? We're looking for crumbs. We'll be here forever. We're looking for dust. So, in halacha, it's brought down. To put it short and to give you two different categories. If it's bigger than a kazai, so kazai is an olive, 30 grams or 1 ounce roughly. If it's bigger than that size, it needs to be inedible to a dog, and therefore it's not a problem anymore. If it's smaller than that size, it needs to be inedible to a human, and then you don't have to worry about looking for it. This comes, I didn't make this up, this comes from the Mishnah Berurah. In halacha it says, if it's smaller than a kazai, you don't have to wait. Now, that doesn't mean you can eat it, or you can even put yourself in a situation where you might eat a small amount of chametz, as we mentioned. It's a big issue, even a crumb of chametz on Pesach. This is why the kitchen is a much more serious endeavor, because you have to properly clean it to make sure there's no crumbs that might fall into food on Pesach. However, in the rest of the house, let's say I'm talking about my bedroom, I don't have to worry that maybe there's a tiny crumb, because even if there is, it's not going to be edible to a human. And as long as we're keeping our houses clean, we're vacuuming, and we do a proper bedikas chametz, which we'll explain what that is in a second, that is okay. So, an example of where a crumb could be a problem is where it could touch food. The most typical examples are the kids come home from school with the Haggadahs, and they're like, oh, look at this Haggadah, I want to put it on the Seder table. Now the problem is they had that Haggadah right next to them when they had their snack, and they had their bread, and they had their pita, and if there's a crumb that falls out of that into your Pesach food, that's a problem. The same goes for the food that we buy before Pesach. You come to pick up your matzah from shul, and you put it in your car, and it sits on some crumbs, and you put it in the kitchen, then you put it on the Seder table. That's a problem. So there are instances on Pesach where eating a crumb is a problem, and that we have to be aware of. But searching for crumbs is a different story. The Mishnah Berurah says crumbs which are not edible, smaller than 1 ounce, which are not edible to a human, you don't have to worry about. On the same note of crumbs, very underrated, people don't talk about this enough, but our devices that are on us, whether it be our phone, or our earpods, or our tablets, or our computers, kitchen pens, all these things have crumbs on them. You look inside anything, there's going to be lint, and it'll also be often crumbs and pockets. So we have to make sure that we get to all of those places, because again, if we were to put one of those crumbs in our mouths on Pesach, even by mistake, that would be a big problem. So that is when regards to eating. But in regards to cleaning, this is I call it the search and destroy mission. So now we're on the search mission. You're looking for chametz. What do we do? Now, of course, on Pesach, there's a certain beauty in doing things 100%. Some people have adopted many, what we call in Hebrew, chumras, stringencies. But the baseline halacha is, if you're on a ladder, right, which some people do, if you're on your hands and knees on the floor, assuming you've got no kids in the house, or if you're holding a toothpick or a toothbrush, you're moving your couch, or you're moving a big appliance, you're moving your fridge, that is not Pesach cleaning. That's spring cleaning. For Pesach cleaning, you don't need to do that. And some people do that and they get very stressed for Pesach. If you're going to do that, don't get stressed about it, because that's not Pesach, that's spring cleaning. According to halacha, you don't need to do all these things. You don't need to move your fridge. You don't need to clean the cracks and the crevices. Why? We'll see in a second. But you don't have to do all these things. Pesach cleaning could technically take, a day or two, I talk about hours, days, not weeks, not months. And in the olden days, bedikas chametz was done they had small houses, 1 room, 2 rooms, and they would do bedikas chametz on the night. Took them a couple of hours. That's how they would search for chametz. So, they say the only thing that should be bitter on Seder Night is the maror, not the people that did the cleaning of the house. So, if you want to get a ladder and clean the top of your ceiling fan, do that. But that is not Pesach cleaning. Why? Because, we'll explain in a second. There are other things that, by the way, are a big deal. Cooking is a big deal. Kashering can be scary. But the cleaning really doesn't need to be if you know what you're doing and you know what you're looking for. Because the halacha is as follows. The Mishnah says very, very clearly. First Mishnah in Pesach, any place that you don't put chametz, you don't need to check. So an example, you have in your house a garage, and you never put food in the garage. Or you have the behind the freezer. You don't put food there. So therefore you don't need to search for chametz. And I'm not going to quote it now. The Shulchan Aruch quotes that in depth exactly according to halacha what you need to search for. And he says, you search for all places where there's a concern there might be chametz. And he gives examples. You search the rooms and the upper floor and he says sometimes you might go upstairs to the bedrooms with food, so you have to search for chametz over there. And he gives examples of other places, but he says, some people have wine cellars, and in wine cellars, if you're sure you didn't bring food, you don't have to search it. If you might have gone down there with bread, you do have to search it. So this is the halacha. Then he talks about holes in the wall, ridges, and you have to worry about there being a piece of bread over there. He says, well, if you can't naturally reach it with your hand, it's too low or it's too high, then you don't have to search it for chametz. That's why I said, if you don't have to stand on a ladder, you don't have to crawl on your hands and knees, especially if you don't have kids in the house. So there's basically two rules you have to keep in mind when you're searching for chametz. Number one, was this an area where chametz was possibly brought into? That means, during the year, do people come here with food, right? Well, you never sat on top of your ceiling fan and you had a sandwich, so you don't have to be worried about that, right? You never moved the dishwasher and ate a piece of bread over there. The same is the other way around. You have to think the second condition that has to be fulfilled is, am I going to access this place over Pesach? So it could be that a piece of bread fell behind my fridge freezer, but I don't have to worry about it. Why? Because I don't plan on moving my fridge freezer over Pesach. And in fact, if you're planning to move stuff around, don't do it over Pesach. So for example, I'll just give you an example. In my house, most of my appliances and furniture stays exactly where it is. However, I have one piece of a couch that I move depending on how many guests I have. So I move that routinely. So first of all, chametz might have gone there. Second of all, I might move it on Pesach. And therefore, I have to search behind and under that piece of the couch. That's the only. But everything else, I can leave as is. If I'm doing not spring cleaning. Spring cleaning, you might want to get more serious. But for Pesach cleaning, you have to think, is it likely, did I ever, take food up to my bedroom? Well, then I have to look for chametz over there. I don't have to look under my bed because I don't plan to move my bed over during Pesach. Now, one thing you can do to get out of looking for chametz is simply to sell it or to tape it off and make it a place that's not going to be accessible on Pesach. So, for example, if I have cupboards in the kitchen, I don't want to clean them all and I don't need them over Pesach, I don't need the space. I just put some tape on it, and if I'm worried there's crumbs, I sell it to non-Jew, and that's it. I don't have to search for chametz because it's not a place that I'm going to access on Pesach. Okay? So, again, the conditions to sum them all up, there has to be a reasonable concern that chametz went there. It has to be an exposed place on Pesach, and you also need that it's either, what you're looking for is either less than 1 ounce and it's edible by a human, or if it's bigger than 1 ounce, has to be made sure that it's all the way down to inedible, even by a dog. So let's very briefly go around the house, and again, I mentioned before, this CRC guide, they have a little bit of guidelines and things to jog your memory about where to look. So he talks about a person should sweep, vacuum, and mop the entire house, empty the vacuum cleaner bags. Again, because you might not think about it, but if you have a piece of bread in your trash, or in a vacuum bag, or in a robot vacuum bag, that is a piece of chametz on your property that you own. That is a big problem for Pesach. So you have to think, like, where could there be a piece of bread in my house? Or, big thing people forget, in my car, or in my office. People in their office, they sometimes have a drawer down there, they have ramen noodles, which, if I ever run out of food in the office, I'm going to have these ramen noodles. Those are literally chametz that you own over Pesach. Again, you don't necessarily have to do much about it. You could just put some tape over it and make sure to write down on the document or to have in mind that I'm selling that chametz as well, and you're covered. But you have to deal with it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of work. You just have to think about it. Okay? We generally collect all the chametz to 1 or 2 places. We don't want to have chametz all over the place because then it's inevitable that some chametz is going to come out over Pesach. So if I put it all in a couple of cabinets in the kitchen and I mark those off with tape, That way, those are sold and sorted for Pesach. Right? We have to clean all parts of the kitchen. We'll go around that a little bit in a bit. A person has to vacuum the couches, and they do have to vacuum in between and underneath and around the pillows to move them out. Why? Because there are crumbs that are probably recent. Maybe there's some croutons that fell there last week, and those are proper chametz on Pesach. So therefore, those I have to get rid of. Those are edible to a human, and therefore I have to get rid of those. A person has to check drawers, especially in the kids' room. But it's not a big deal. You open it, you move things around a little bit. I don't see any chametz. Those are searched. A person has to check medicine cabinets to see if there's any toiletries and cosmetics. We'll see in a bit that are proper, that could be chametz for Pesach. And especially when there's kids around, kids' toys, kids' books, those have to be wiped down or, again, put in a box and put away for Pesach. But you have to be aware that you need to deal with them. So let's go very quickly to the bedroom. Sometimes there's chametz in the bedroom. Sometimes we bring food in the bedroom. Some people have a no food upstairs or no food in the bedroom policy. If you have that, amazing. But if you don't, or if you have kids in the house, then policies are out the window because the kids take food everywhere. Then you have to look. So this is the Mishnah Berurah, by the way. It says if you have kids at home, you go search over there. So what do? If there's a chance you're eating pretzels over your bedroom drawers, you have to open the bedroom drawers and look, a visual check. You move the clothes aside, just a visual check. You don't have to wipe anything down. You're not worried about those tiny crumbs that are, even if they're there, they're inedible. If you're two adults and you know you never brought any food in this room, then you don't even need to do that. Again, dresses. You don't need to move the dresses. You don't need to move the beds because you're not going to be moving them over Pesach. If you do, then you have to move them. And again, for people that plan to move stuff around, don't do it over Pesach because that would make you have to check it all before Pesach. You have to move all your big cupboards and everything. Whatever you're moving on Pesach. Now, coming downstairs to the toy room or playroom, there's always chametz in a toy room. Kids bring food in. So what most people do is they take a few toys out, they clean them down, they wash them. You can even run most toys, non-electric toys, through the washing machine. And everything else you put in a box, you put away, and you have your playroom ready for Pesach. Some people even have Pesach toys, special Pesach toys set aside. Like we mentioned, floors and carpets, just a regular vacuum, a regular sweep. And then, again, once you've designated a room chametz free, some people even put a sign up, but the point is, that room, no more chametz in that room. Now we come downstairs, not to the kitchen yet, but again, books. Now you might think, oh, what do I do about my books? I might have crumbs. Again, same two conditions. Could chametz have come there? Well, most books I don't use around food. There may be some books that I use around food. Now, those books, you have to think again, am I going to use them on Pesach? Are they going to be accessed on Pesach? Or maybe I can just section them off and then I don't have to check them. Okay? If you know that I've read this book next to food and I'm going to read it on Pesach, then you have to bang out the book and make sure there's no crumbs. Kids' books are normally extra dirty, so normally just put them all away, wipe down a few for Pesach, or you can have, again, Pesach books. Okay, so now we come to the kitchen. Now, for the kitchen, one of the key things you have to remember is there are a lot of crumbs, and crumbs are a problem if they were to fall into food. So one of the things you have to think about, the first thing you think about is really the fridge, freezer, where you're going to want to put your Pesach food inside there. And as much as possible, if you have a spare freezer, you can put your chametz and sell it, and that way you don't have to search anything. You're done. But if you have another type of freezer, a freezer you're going to be using, you have to defrost it because in the ice there's always going to be crumbs. Defrost it and clean it properly. And cleaning it includes cleaning all the rubber sealant around the entrances because you'll be surprised how much crumbs you're going to find inside there. And you have to clean all parts of the refrigerator and the freezer, including the storage bins. Many people have a custom to cover the shelves, to line the shelves, just because, again, it's very hard to get everything. That way you can just, you should clean it still so there's no visible crumbs, but you should cover it. And anywhere, this is very important, anywhere where it's tough to get, you can use a strong caustic spray or a strong, bleach type of thing, and you can spray inside and you're covered. Why? Because, again, that, if you can't clean it, makes it be considered inedible. It makes it be considered inedible even to a dog, and therefore it is not a problem. Even if it were to fall into food, it's not considered food anymore. So really, the fridge freezer is one of the hardest parts of cleaning because that's not spring cleaning. That has to be cleaned properly. Everything else is more lenient almost than spring cleaning. But this has to be done to make sure there's not a crumb. Many people are strict even after cleaning their fridge freezers, especially freezers, to put everything in bags and then take the bag off before they bring it to a surface or eat it, because again of how many crumbs are in the freezers. But again, they should normally be defrosted. They should be wiped, cleaned, and often scrubbed clean until there's visually no crumbs over there. And anything you can't get off or you can't get to, one should use a strong spray. The same goes for cupboards. Now, cupboards are often are normally much easier to clean. They're simple squares, easy to get into. And again, don't clean every cupboard in the kitchen. I don't know, 70% of them are going to stay Chametz, just going to sign them, seal them off, just put some tape over it, whatever. And then the ones that I need for my Pesach kelim, for my Pesach utensils, my Pesach food, I'm going to wipe down, make sure there's no crumbs. And then again, there's a custom to line it because of how many crumbs are often in cupboards. Custom to line it doesn't mean you have to line till the very end. Just line it to make sure that when I take a plate out of there, I can take it out, knowing that there's no crumbs going to be on my plate from before Pesach. Okay, so with that, we kind of finished the cleaning. If you have any questions, please let me know. But that's kind of an overview. Again, you have to think of everything as, first of all, in the search for Chametz, was this a place where I'm likely to be over Pesach? I'm not going to be under my bed. I'm not going to be behind my couch. I'm not going to be behind my freezer. Therefore, I don't need to search. Did Chametz come into this spot? Well, no, Chametz didn't come into my ceiling fan. Chametz is not likely to have been in my under my bedsheet. Therefore, I don't have to search for Chametz over there. And the second thing you have to think about is, if this is a place where there's going to be food and I'm going to be eating, if it's a kitchen area, if it's a freezer, anywhere where you're storing or eating food, that has to be cleaned down properly. Many people, let's say for the dining room table or things like that, again, they can either clean it or simply just cover it with a thick plastic that's not going to rip over Pesach, and that way you don't have to worry about getting all the crumbs out, because if you are eating Pesach on a table, besides the fact that you should probably kasher if you use hot chametz over there, but besides for that fact, you're going to have to worry about crumbs, so just cover it, and it's much easier to deal with. So now we come to the kashering phase of preparing for Pesach. This normally comes afterwards, right? You clean, and then you kasher, and then now you've changed over. So now we're up to kashering. Now, kashering can often be the most daunting part, so we'll just run through some of the utensils in the kitchen. Just a question, what about things outside of the home, like a library book or shared work? Yeah. So anything that's not yours or in your possession, you don't have to search for chametz. Anything that is in your possession, whether you own it or not, you have to search for chametz if it's going to be used and accessible over Pesach. So, for example, you borrowed a book from a library. Well, if that book's going to be on the shelf from the beginning of Pesach to the end, and I'm not going to use it, then I don't need to search. If I'm going to be reading over Pesach, then I need to make sure there's no crumbs in it. And the same, for shared workspace, you don't have to worry about all the rest of the people in the office. But for my workspace, I have to make sure that I'm not eating my Pesach food on the surface. Again, because there could have been hot chametz there. So the next question, how to kasher electric stovetop, we're going to get there. We're going to get there now. So let's just start with the kashering. So basic principle of kashering, by the way, we're doing kashering for small utensils over here in the shul on Sunday from 10 to 11, free of charge. But the basic way, this is Sunday, April 6th, so next Sunday. So the basic principle of kashering is that in the walls of our pots, of our ovens, of our microwave, of our stovetop, of everything we have that was used for hot, in the walls of it has the taste of what was cooked in it. Now, we're not going to go into detail of before 24 hours, after 24 hours, and all the differences, but for the sake of the way we're looking at this as we approach Pesach is inside of the walls of my pot, inside the walls of my stovetop, in the countertops on my kitchen, there's the taste of chametz, where if I put anything hot down or use it for hot on Pesach, the taste is going to come out. This is called tam ka'ikar. The taste in halacha is like the actual food. Now, how do we get rid of it? We kasher it. Now, we kasher it generally, is called in Hebrew kabola kachpota. The same that was used to get the taste in, we get the taste out. Within certain categories, but that's the principle. So, for example, I have a pot, and I want to use it for Pesach. So I need to, I need to think, how did it absorb? Well, it absorbed chametz because it bubbled with water, and I put my pasta in, and it bubbled into the walls of the pot. So how do I get the chametz taste out? I bubble it out. I have to wait 24 hours, and I have to make sure it's clean. But after that, I bubble it out, and I make sure that I kasher it properly. We'll see what that means, properly. But that's the principle of kashering. So that's why even for a microwave, some people say, that you can kasher it with steam because that's how it absorbs taste through the steam into the walls of the microwave. Now, some have extra stringencies when it comes to kashering. After kashering, they immediately douse cold water over it to stop the taste spreading and everything. But we're talking now about the baseline, bare minimum we have to do for kashering. It's important to know you cannot kasher on Pesach itself, except if you're using a fire that's 800 degrees or more, which we'll get to in a second, which is how an oven self-cleaning works. But generally, you cannot kasher on Pesach, again, because the way kashering works is kind of diluting the taste of chametz that's in the walls of this pot or whatever, any surface. And, diluting doesn't work on Pesach because even a minute amount is a problem. One other thing to know, which is very important, when kashering, you might have a big pot of hot water and you're putting stuff in. Do not dump in multiple spoons or forks or everything at the same time. For two reasons. Number one, because you can actually see this yourself, 1 or 2 spoons already cools down the water and it's not bubbling. And the water has to be actively bubbling when we are kashering. Number two, because you also need to make sure we always have a ratio of water to whatever you're kashering of 60-1. So that's why if you put in too many things, the ratio is not there anymore. So these are things to keep in mind. We have to kasher with boiling water. It's actually bubbling. Actually, you can't just wait a couple seconds. It's not boiling anymore. It has to actually be bubbling. That's what we kasher with water. So we'll give examples now, but I just want to mention again on dorchikva.org, we have a fantastic guide to kashering. It's not ours. I mean, I just took it from the CRC. It's called it's from their Pesach guide. It's on page 8, I think, and it's a simple 2-page kashering guide. 2-page. On the front, it has all the different types of things that we have, and can you kasher them and can you not. And the front page, and the second page, it says how to kasher the common kitchen appliances. So, very much recommend that you look at that. So, and by the way, again, on the apps, you can search how to kasher. The Star K app has a kashering guide. The CRC app has a kashering guide. So, very much recommend those again. So, how do we kasher? So, let's talk about the sink. Now, the sink, how did it absorb? Again, through water. Therefore, we have to kasher with boiling water. It has to be actually boiling water, and it also, because it has to actually be very hot water, almost as close as possible to boiling point, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. That means you have to take the pot of boiling water and pour it over every part of the sink. You can't just pour it over part of the sink and let it run, because by the time it runs 6 inches, a little bit more, it's practically cold. Certainly for halachic purposes, it's not sufficient for kashering. So when you're kashering, first, of course, make sure it's 100% clean. Then wait 24 hours. And you're especially not allowed to use it for hot. We try use it not for anything. And then after 24 hours, you can kasher it with boiling water over every single spot in the sink. Now, you have to make sure that your sink can actually be kashered. Metal absorbs, and the taste can also come out using hot water. So metal, our sages, Chacham tell us, can be kashered. Glass, some people have glass sinks nowadays, apparently, that cannot be kashered on Pesach for Ashkenazim. Porcelain, if you have a porcelain sink, it can't be kashered, therefore you should cover it. And also don't use hot water in the sink over Pesach. Metal sinks can be kashered. If you have other types of utensils, other types of materials, let me know. For countertops, there's actually a whole guideline. But anyway, how do you actually kasher it? Like I said, you clean it properly, including the drain, all the gunk over there. Leave it for 24 hours. You have to mark it off maybe in the house to make sure nobody uses it. And then you pour bubbling water. Has to actually be boiling water over it. When you use a kettle, by the way, some people are strict to actually keep the kettle plugged in and press the button down, because the kettle stops bubbling very, very quickly. But most say as long as you're not pouring for too long, as long as it came out of a bubbling kettle, it's still okay. And when you're kashering, it's very important that you remember to kasher the knobs. You remember to kasher the spouts, all those little things on top, all have hot chametz steam probably at some point, most likely, during the year, and therefore they need to be kashered properly. Again, cleaned properly, and then eventually kasher properly. And then people have a hose, pull out that hose, kasher on top. Now we paskin that you can kasher hard plastic. Some say because there's soft plastic, which is more strict, in the rubber hose, it's better not to pull it out over Pesach. But either way, you should kasher as much as possible. The hot tap, the cold tap around, and the full spout and everything, every part of it. And by the way, this is just a note of why it's important to be aware of who you eat from on Pesach, because during the year, if a drop is, it's not the end of the world. If a drop of pork falls in my challah, I can eat my challah as long as I know where it is. But here, if you have a bit of taste of chametz that this person didn't know how to kasher and he didn't kasher properly, you could be transgressing eating chametz on Pesach. So it's why kasher on Pesach is at a whole next level. Okay, countertops. Now again, there's a whole guide for countertops, I think in the CRC guide, which different materials can be kashered, which can't. I think formica and wood can be kashered, but you should be aware that scratches, especially in wood, is an issue. You can't kasher wood that's scratched up. Granite can be kashered. You should check the CRC for different types of materials to see if yours can be kashered. If you can't kasher it, you have to cover it. We'll see what that means in a second. But again, when it comes to kashering surfaces and countertops, it's not about just spritzing water and letting it go all the way. No, that's freezing cold. By the time it gets to the end, it's nowhere near kashering level. You have to take the kettle or the boiling pot and move it over every pot. They say if there isn't water all over your kitchen by the time you're finished, you probably didn't do it right. And this is actually why there's actually a rule in kashering that if you're worried you might break something around the kashering, your kashering's not valid because we're concerned you didn't do it properly. You didn't get it to the right temperature, you didn't pour the right amount of water. So if for example, you got a brand new kitchen and your wife says, "Oh, be careful, don't ruin my wooden cupboards with your kashering," then there's a risk you're not going to kasher properly, and therefore you shouldn't kasher. So it's important to be very conscious. And one of the other options you can do is to cover the surfaces. It's often easier than kashering countertops, especially. But you have to be careful. Not just one sheet of aluminum foil will tear. It's thin. Liquids can often get under it if there's even a slight rip in it or over the edges. And therefore, we advise to use at least 2 layers of heavy-duty aluminum foil. Some people even get like fake countertops or a thin layer on top. You have to make sure it's non-porous. If it's like a cardboard and more liquid gets through, then it doesn't help because the chametz taste is still coming out and into whatever food is on top. When I grew up at home, for Pesach, we would take out a whole fake countertop and put it on top of the existing countertop around the whole kitchen. We had a big kitchen. And it made the whole kitchen feel different for Pesach. And that was how we would do it. And it was much easier, even though it was a bit of a schlep taking out these pieces of wood from the attic. But it was, at least there was no hot water all over the place. I mean, we did still kasher the sinks, but we didn't have to kasher the surfaces. We just covered them. It's often the easiest thing to do. So, microwave. So we'll get to the oven and we'll get to the thing. But first, the microwave, very briefly. It is ideal to buy a new microwave. Kashering a microwave is a big machlokes. Can you do it? Can you not? Some say you can. Some say you can't. Some say you can kasher with steam. Some say you can't. The glass tray for Ashkenazim certainly cannot be kashered. So you've got to take that out. Microwaves are not that expensive, so people often advise just buying another one for Pesach. But for those that say you can kasher it, you use the same method. It became chametz using steam. So you use steam again. You get a cup. You fill it up with water. Some people even add soap. And you let it go for 10 minutes or so until there's proper steam around the whole place, 10-15 minutes. And then you have to move the cup and do it in another place because where the cup was actually sitting, no steam touched. Again, it's not so recommended, but in a case of need, a microwave can be kashered. You have to be very, very careful to use a microwave-safe big styrofoam cup because if you use anything else, they can break it. It can be dangerous. Of course, it goes without saying, it has to be cleaned 100% beforehand. Microwaves are often filthy, especially the roof. And anyway, you can't get to, you should spray a strong caustic spray again, which will make any food be considered inedible, even to a dog. Ovens. Now, ovens, I like to say they're either the easiest or the hardest. If you have a self-cleaning oven, it has to be now they're coming out with these modern self-cleaning ovens that use water and they're aquatic and they don't get so hot. But if you have a good old-fashioned self-cleaning oven, they get up into 750, sometimes even 800 degrees during the self-cleaning cycle. You can just put it on self-cleaning, and that caches it and everything inside it. You don't have to clean it. You don't have to wait 24 hours. This is a very special high-level method of kashering called libun gamur. It gets red hot for such a significant amount of time that it caches it to the highest degree. Again, it has to be proper self-cleaning, not the aquatic self-cleaning. The proof that it gets so hot, if you ever leave a wooden spoon inside such an oven, it will be ashes by the end of it. So non-self-cleaning ovens, however, are almost the hardest thing to kasher. Not the hardest, but they're almost that, because they're often very filthy and very hard to clean and get into, and you cannot kasher them unless they are 100% clean. You also cannot kasher the grates. Some people just don't like to use self-cleaning because self-cleaning is so intense. There's only a limited amount of times you can do self-cleaning in an oven. Once a year, I think, is perfectly fine. But self-cleaning can actually break an oven eventually. Some people don't like to do it. But again, I think once a year is fine. They do have that function for a reason. But again, those people don't want to do self-clean or they don't have self-clean. They have to clean the oven very, very well. I mean, no scrapes. There's often these bits of black. There's not often. There's always. I've never seen a clean oven that's been used before. And it has to be cleaned very, very well. Every bit of black dirt. I know the ovens that we have over here in the kitchen, we had 2 or 3 people for almost a full week in the Dodge kitchen cleaning these ovens. And then I still came in, I had to inspect it and tell them, do this, do that. What about behind this screw? Unscrew this. Get behind the fan. It was a complete nightmare. And once it's cleaned very, very well, and any places that you can't get to, again, spray with a caustic. You wait 24 hours, put it on the highest for an hour, and then you've kashered it. Again, not the grates. It's not self-cleaning, so nothing inside of it's been kashered. It hasn't got anywhere near that temperature that would be good enough for that. But that is how a non-self-clean oven should be kashered. Stovetops. Now, stovetops, nowadays, the Kashering gives similar guidance for basically different types of stovetops. They say, including glass ones, this is how you kasher them. Every part of the stovetop should be cleaned properly. And this includes getting, we say, crumbs can be a problem. This is where crumbs can be a problem, as an example. Inside the ridges around an oven, make sure you scrape any residual food out of it using a knife, a toothpick, or something. And it should not be used after that for 24 hours. Then we turn the fire or the coil up to the maximum temperature for 30 minutes. Now, some people don't like to turn, especially glass stoves, up for the maximum temperature for 30 minutes because it could crack. It doesn't actually happen nowadays, but better safe than sorry. And therefore, you can turn them on one by one for 10 minutes or so. The idea is you're turning on the highest, and it burns itself out. It burns itself out. Now, the non-hub part, we basically spoke about kashering a stovetop, but that's only for the actual where the pot goes. But where the pot doesn't go, it gets warm just because of it, but it doesn't get hot. So this is why one of the least known, I would say, halachas of in the kitchen problems that could arise on Pesach is putting pots down or food down on the non-kashered parts of the stovetop. Because we mentioned you can't kasher glass. And even those that have gas stovetops, and they put, again, the flames on the highest, that only helps for the area where the actual fire is, the actual heat, the actual glass, whatever it may be, the actual induction, that area you've kashered. But what about the other areas? You haven't really kashered that. So even though you've cleaned it 100%, you'd have to get that red hot. You'd really have to and that's practically impossible to do. So for that reason, one should cover it, or at least set a reminder, put some tape over those middle areas in a safe way to make sure that we set a reminder not to put pots down in that middle area over Pesach, because that middle area we don't have a way to kasher, and one should put pots only down on the actual rings themselves. This, by the way, the same applies for meat and milk, but it's because it's less strict and there's bottle b'shishim and there's leniencies that one drop will be annulled. We're not as strict, but for Pesach this is the middle part of the stove is a real problem. One should also make sure to clean everywhere around the knobs, all areas around behind the burners where the splash is, on top. If there's anywhere it could drip from the stove's hood, those should all be thoroughly cleaned for Pesach. Moving on to a dishwasher. Many say that you can't kasher a dishwasher because it has many crevices. It's got hollow parts. It's got a place in the bottom where it filter away all the disgusting residue falls in. You can't really get inside there. And it has plastic. Many in America follow Rav Moshe and they don't kasher such types of plastic. And even those who do allow kashering, they only allow it for year round and not for Pesach. And therefore a dishwasher shouldn't be kashered. For Pesach it should be marked off. A Keurig or an espresso machine, those are pretty simple. You just have to clean it. You wait 24 hours. Then you take out, the area that you put the cup in. You put a kosher for Pesach pod in. By the way, there's in the OU have a long list of kosher for Pesach Keurig pods, and you just run it through the machine, and that acts as the Kashering. Again, it should be properly cleaned because sometimes there could be crumbs around it. Hot water urn, like we use for Shabbos to be able to have coffees. If an electric hot water urn is in the kitchen or around food during the year, it has to be kashered for Pesach. Right? It's because during the year, somebody might have touched chametz to it, somebody might have poured onto chametz, somebody might have put a challah to defrost, any number of scenarios that chametz could have come in contact with it. And therefore, it should be kashered. These are very difficult to kasher. There's plastic in them as well. And therefore, it's very much recommended that we buy a new urn. And by the way, urns are not always that expensive, and it's nice to have a backup. If ever it comes before Shabbos, you plug in your urn during the year, and let's take out the Pesach one and use that. So it might be worthwhile buying a new one for Pesach. They can be kashered if one's 100% sure that no food came into contact with it. And it was never near food. It was never near a surface where there may have been food in the kitchen. And it was never splashed with food. Then it can be used just by cleaning without kashering for Pesach. But most homes are not this disciplined to be able to be so confident, and therefore should kasher the urn, which again is boiling it, even boiling it over, which is complicated. But like I said, it's better to buy a new one, and it also serves as a good backup one. And keep in mind, these things, they have a shelf life of how many times you use them. So in the long run, in most cases, it's not going to cost you extra money because you'll use this one for Pesach this year and it'll last you for another 10, So it's a good backup. Hot plates, platter, Shabbos hot plates. Those, if it's a glass top, it can't be kashered. If it's a metal top, then you should clean it very, very well. I mean, very, very well, because there's always ridges and everything. You should wait 24 hours, plug it in for an hour, and keep it on the hottest if it has a switch. It's better if it doesn't, but you should put it on the highest for an hour. Cover it with tin foil, and then you can use it for Pesach. Okay, so that's really an overview of the kashering. Like I said, there's a fantastic kashering guide you can get. It's linked on our website as well, CRC. Exactly a list of all the different things. What can be kashered, how it's listed in red, orange, green, how easy, is it easy to kasher, is it impossible, is it difficult, etc. So we very much recommend looking at that. Again, feel free to ask me questions as well. Just other things to keep in mind for Pesach as we move on from the kashering. Tablecloths, fabric tablecloths can be used for Chametz and then for Pesach if they are washed properly, laundered in between and proper full heat. Vinyl tablecloths should not be kashered and should be replaced for Pesach. It's because vinyl is basically some sort of plastic. It's not inherently kasherable. Therefore, one should buy new ones. Now, moving out of the kitchen, I want to move to ingredients a little bit, and keeping in mind shopping and what we have to think about. And again, I would say see the guides, see the apps. You can literally be on the CRC app. You search up anything you may be in the store for, mouthwash, and it will tell you what the status of mouthwash is. So speaking of that, so medicine, cosmetic, and toiletries. So the CRC say as follows: all these things, blush, body soap, conditioners, cream, eyeliners, eyeshadow, stick deodorant, these are fine, right? Foundation, lotion, ointments, mascara, nail polish, they are permitted on Pesach, regardless of ingredients, because they are completely not edible, right? Even though I'm not eating them, it would be a problem for me to own it on Pesach if it was edible, but it's not edible. Now, why? Because again, it's not considered edible for humans, right? Now, I want to put out a note. People often get confused because you hear about not being edible for humans and not being edible for dogs. So which one is it? So if it's something that is a food, I mean, let's say it was a piece of bread, and now I need to make sure that it's not a problem for me to have over Pesach, then I have to make sure it's not edible for even a dog. But if it's something that we're trying to figure out, is it a food, like mascara or, then I have to think, is it edible by a human, right? If it's not inherently a food, then it's a little bit confusing, but you should know there's these two categories. But anyway, however, things like liquid deodorant, perfume, cologne, hairspray, sunscreen, shaving lotion, and wipes, they often have something called denatured alcohol, which can be edible and therefore can be a problem. So not to fret, but you can check in the list, and there are certain brands that you'll be able to tell do not have denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol comes from grains, and therefore it could be a problem. And you might say, these are not edible by humans. Now, some deodorants, you're right, but perfumes and cologne, some of them can be edible. There was a story, and I said this last year, a 1988 presidential candidate's wife, her name was Kitty Dukakis. She was an alcoholic, and she actually drank hairspray and aftershave and perfume because it was part of her alcohol addiction. So these things, it's better, it's ideal. There are different opinions that say you don't have to worry about them, these are not considered edible, even though some alcoholics would, these are not considered edible to humans. But it is better to find ones that don't have denatured alcohol, and you can check the lists, they have different brands. And especially things that go in and around your mouth, like lipstick, mouthwash, and toothpaste. These things can contain chametz. Now, again, there are some authorities that say you don't need kosher Pesach on these. However, most say you should look for good brands. Now, again, these are listed. You don't have to worry, what am I going to buy toothpaste? How am I going to find kosher Pesach toothpaste in Charleston, South Carolina? The OU, the CRC, they have these on their lists. And, the ingredients that could be problematic in toothpaste is pretty simple. There's a sorbitol that it's created by hydrogenating glucose. Now, glucose, you'll know, is derived from chametz, or sometimes kidneys, but sometimes even chametz. And therefore, you should know most glucose in the US is not made from chametz, and therefore you can look in the Star-K. The Star-K is a good place for this. The Star-K has a list. All the AIM toothpaste, all the Colgate toothpaste, they're all made out of vegetable glycerin and not made out of glucose from grains. And it goes through lists. You can buy these ones from Crest, etc., etc. So doesn't mean necessarily you're not going to be without toothpaste, but it does mean you just have to check the list and find one. Like I said, there are opinions that are lenient in the case of need where we can rely on, but it is ideal. These things go in our mouth. They are edible. They don't, you shouldn't eat a spoonful of it, but realistically, toothpaste and mouthwash is made to be edible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be approved by the FDA. And the same goes even for lipstick. So therefore, you should look through. There are lists on these. Again, the main three are the Star-K, the CRC, and the OU have fantastic guides. And I think the Star-K specifically for these types of things has good brands. They said you can buy all the Colgate toothpastes because they don't use grains in them. And of course, one should get a new toothbrush for Pesach. For example, someone has a lipstick and it's kosher Pesach, but it may be crumbs in it from before Pesach. So before Pesach, you rub it off to make sure there's no crumbs. Medicine. So Rav Moshe Feinstein Paskin, this is how we follow the halacha, that anything that the doctor prescribed to you, you keep on taking because it's not considered a food, right? However, there are some medications that you can get in chewable or dissolvable, or they're very sweet. For example, Advil. Advil is basically just ibuprofen with a very sweet coating on it. Now, the Hashem say that coating could be chametz. In fact, I think it is problematic substance. And therefore, instead of having Advil, have ibuprofen. Have plain ibuprofen pill that has no taste, has no flavor, it's not chewable, it's not dissolvable. So again, these are the guidelines that the Hashem give. But if you're being prescribed a medication, you have to, and you should continue taking it. Vitamins, as we say in England, vitamins. If you're not told by a doctor, then you need to make sure they have a good hashgacha because they're not considered medicine. They're considered food. So again, you have to check them out, find vitamins which have a good hashgacha, or put the vitamins away for Pesach. Because these are not considered, sick people are not people taking vitamins, healthy people taking vitamins. These are not considered non-foods, they're considered to be foods. Now we're wrapping up here, and we've finished the episodes of the introductions, the kashering, the cleaning, the kashering, the shopping. Again, I would say look at those lists. But I do want to mention Erev Pesach on Shabbos this year. Now, there are 17 differences that are mostly small differences between regular year and this year. I'm not going to go through them all, but I did make a pre-Pesach primer you can find on our website as well that has listed a timeline, exactly what happens when this year especially. Now, we don't want to be stressed. In fact, this year we're less stressed than usual because normally Erev Pesach is very stressful. This year, Erev Pesach, we're relaxing the whole day. It's what are we going to do in the afternoon of Shabbos, right, before going into Pesach? So I want to continue this timeline and move through what's going to happen this year. So this year, one of the differences is going to be, you probably won't notice it, but the Shabbos HaGadol Drasha, the rabbi gives a Shabbos HaGadol Drasha the week before, a big speech the week before Pesach, teaching about the halachas of Pesach. Normally that would happen the Shabbos before Pesach. This year that should happen the week beforehand. Now we don't really do this. This is kind of in place of this and the recording, and this is. But the Shabbos HaGadol Drasha will happen this week, Parshas Vayikra, instead of next week, the day before Pesach. Okay, Thursday, April the 10th, 3 days before Pesach. The Tanis B'chorim, the fast of the firstborns, will happen on Thursday. So firstborns should fast on the Thursday. Now it's more lenient this year because there's one opinion that says in a year when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, instead of fasting Erev Pesach, we don't fast at all. We do paskin that the fast is on Thursday. We make a siyum, and there's some people that in normal years they would fast the whole day, some firstborns, but even they can rely on a siyum this year. So we're going to have shachris, we'll make a siyum with bagels, we'll make sure it's outside so we don't spread chametz around. The bedikas chametz happens on that night. Normally bedikas chametz happens the night before Pesach. Now that would be Friday night. We can't search around for chametz with a candle on Friday night. And therefore, on Thursday night, April the 10th at 8:24 p.m. from nightfall, from dark, that's when we search for chametz. And after that, we say the first annulment of chametz. That, by the way, that night is the last time to get your form in. Please don't wait till the last minute to sell the chametz. The next day is Friday. It's not Erev Pesach, but it feels like Erev Pesach because it's the last day we can get prepared for Pesach properly. So we're going to do the sale. The rabbi's over here at 10 a.m. But again, that's not something you have to do. We will also have a service getting rid of trash. You may have a lot of chametz in your house. You don't want to have it around. And you're not allowed to own it from the next day, from Shabbos. So we're going to have a special trash collection, the blue bin over here. So you can put your chametz over here. Just put it here by midday and there'll be a collection in the afternoon. This year, even though owning chametz only happens on the day before Pesach, which is Shabbos, this year we still burn the chametz on Friday morning. Now, normally, the way it works is the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, the latest time to eat chametz is, let's say, 10:30. And the latest time to burn and to get rid of, to own chametz, you're not allowed to own chametz later past 11:30. This year, we do the burning of chametz earlier. That means because you're still allowed to eat chametz. In fact, we're still going to eat chametz on Friday night and Shabbos morning. But we still burn the chametz on Friday morning by the appropriate time, what it would be in a regular year, which in Charleston is 12:04 p.m. But we have to make sure to leave out challah rolls for the Shabbos meals. Normally we would say the annulment, the kol chamira after that. This year we don't. We wait till the next day, till Shabbos. And there are others, very, very few that don't, but we still eat chametz Friday afternoon. Again, you don't want to make your whole house chametz, but you can go out, you can eat chametz, there's no problem. There's no Erev Tavshilin, because Erev Tavshilin is what we use to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, not the other way around, not from Shabbos to Yom Tov, of course. The Seder preparation should happen before Shabbos, because many of the things we do to prepare for the Seder, roasting the shank bone, washing all the lettuce, cleaning all the lettuce for Mara and for Korech, preparing the salt water should not ideally be done on Shabbos. If it's done on Shabbos, it has to be done with a shinoi, with a change. Grinding charoises and Mara to make the charoises, and when you want to make grinding the horseradish for Mara, those things should not be done on Shabbos. Therefore, they should all be done before Shabbos starts on Friday. Then we come to Shabbos itself, which is actually Erev Pesach. Now, we don't have matzah, and we need to have challah, but it's the day before Pesach. Everything's ready for Pesach because we don't have any other time to get ready. So how do we do the Shabbos meals? So we still need to have lechem mishnah. The Torah says Shabbos 3 times. We learn from there you have to have 3 meals on Shabbos. And how do we do that? So most people, this is the three options. The most common option is the first one, is you have just rolls for the Shabbos meals. Specifically for the first 2, some people have 3 meals. But you just take out rolls, you have it over a plate over something which you can throw out easily, a disposable tablecloth. Be careful not to make any crumbs, and then you throw it away. Right? And that's how most people do it. Some people have like a chametz area, maybe a room that they're going to lock off after that and sell, and it's included in the sale. And they eat in that area, they wash and clean up, and then they move out of that area. But either way, most of what's going on is all Pesach prepared for already. Now, in the day of Pesach itself, it's even more difficult. Friday night, you can have challah rolls, and then you have time. There's no deadline. On Shabbos day, we're not allowed to eat chametz past the 4th hour, which is over here. You're not allowed to eat chametz past the deadline of 10:46 a.m. So there's a minhag in pretty much all of Klal Yisrael where they have a very early Shabbos Shachris. Here we're doing at 7:45 a.m. And some people go, oh, it's too early. Next time it's going to happen is in 20:45, so we can deal with that. So we're going to have a very early Shabbos meal and a very early Shabbos Shachris, finish Musaf, and quickly wash. And we're going to have rolls here in the shul outside. People can go home also and eat in a sterile environment and eat the rolls and make sure to finish by 10:46. By 10:46, you're going to have washed your mouth out, brushed your teeth. You're not allowed to use water because it's squeezing, but to do that and to make sure to have gotten rid of every crumb of chametz by then. There's a third method that some people do. Instead of having a chametz area, they don't just roll up. They have matzah ashira, which is egg matzah, because it can't be used for Seder Night. Some people even say it's chametz. Ashkenazim don't have it on Pesach, therefore they have that on Erev Pesach morning. Either way, Pesach by night, Erev Pesach, whether it's the night or the day, we're not allowed to have matzah, therefore we have to figure out a way to have rolls, but we also have to make sure that we're not doing it in a crummy way, in a way that maintains the house in a way that's ready for the time when it becomes forbidden to eat chametz, and certainly for the time where it becomes forbidden to own chametz. Now, a person should dispose of chametz by 12:03 a.m. This is the deadline for owning chametz or having chametz on our property, which means, what do I do if I, by mistake, kept a big challah and I only ate half of it? Now, there's a couple options. You can either flush it down the toilet. Flushing down the toilet gets rid of it, gets it out of my property. I don't own it anymore. It's not edible anymore. It's out of my property. I can put it in a garbage, but not in my house, because it's still in my property. I still own it, and you're not allowed to have chametz on your property that you own over Pesach. And therefore, I have to put it in my trash can, but my trash can is also on my property. So some people, what they do is they put the trash can off the property, because technically the trash can is owned by the city, and they put it off the property. The HOA is probably not going to be very happy with you, especially if your collection day is a different day. It happens to be that our collection day is Tuesday morning over here in West Ashley, so it's still a little far out. But you could say, well, we had Yom Tov on Sunday and Monday, so I'm leaving it out. But anyway, it has to be off your property, and you have to give up ownership of it by 12:03 a.m. Some people use another method where they use bleach and pour it over the bread or whatever they have left over to make sure it's considered completely inedible by the time the deadline comes around. You have to make sure, though, that you allocate this bleach as usable for Pesach, as you're going to use it on Shabbos, otherwise it will be muksa. Generally, bleach is muksa on Shabbos. So, you have to make it completely inedible to a dog because it was previously proper bread. So again, that has to be done by 12:03 p.m. We also have to say the annulment of chametz. Again, the proper end kol chamir, that any chametz that I know that I don't know that I don't own it anymore. We have to make sure that no chametz is on our property anymore, and if it is, it has to be completely flushed down the toilet or considered inedible. In a normal year, we would burn it, but we can't do that on Shabbos. In the afternoon, some people may want to have a nap for the Seder. There's an interesting Magen Avraham who says you're not allowed to prepare from Shabbos to Yom Tov, even from one day of Yom Tov to the next. So you're not allowed to say, I'm going to sleep for the Seder. So instead, you say, I'm going to sleep. And of course, you'll also benefit from it on the Seder night when you'll be more awake for the long Seder night. A person should have Sudah Shlishis at home. So about Shalosh Shudas, the third meal of the day, there's a big question. What do we do? Because you can have one meal in the night, one meal in the morning quickly. What do you do about the second meal? So those that are scrupulous to have bread every Shabbos for Shalosh Shudas, which is a very pious thing, it's a noble thing, it's the right thing. But those who can do that, this week, this Shabbos, they should ideally have two meals in the morning before 10:46, before the deadline for eating chametz. So what they do is they wash on two rolls, they eat enough, because I ask normally about a roll, and then they bench, they do Birkas Hamazon. Now they can't just make another bracha straight away because that would be a bracha in a tricha, bracha that's not needed. So one should take a break, preferably go for a walk. Some say 20 minutes, some say 30 minutes. As long as you have, and then wash again on 2 more rolls, eat another roll, and wash your mouth out and get rid of the chametz all in time for 10:46 a.m. Regardless, everybody should have a shalosh shudas in the afternoon. Again, you can't have matzah, and you obviously can't have bread. So you should have fish, you should have meat, you should have fruit, and that will, in the circumstances, that is allowed to be the shalosh shudas. Normally, you would have to have at least a mazonos, but you can't do that, and therefore, this is what you should have on Erev Pesach, which is Shabbos afternoon. You're not allowed to prepare for the Seder, because again, you can't prepare from Shabbos to Yom Tov, and therefore, until Shabbos finishes at 8:26 p.m. here in Charleston, that is, you can't do anything. You can tidy your table like you would any Shabbos, just you don't want it to look untidy. But you can't lay out the Seder table. You certainly can't light candles until after 8:26, and you can't prepare the table. You can't, you have to. Even if some people say if people have special Yom Tov clothes, they can't change into them until Yom Tov begins. But either way, that's something to keep in mind. Just to finish about the Seder itself, the Seder Sedarim this year will be on Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, and Sunday night. The mitzvahs of the night are 4 main mitzvahs. Obviously, reading the whole Haggadah, telling the Pesach story, especially to kids. 4 cups of wine. Ideally, one should have wine, and ideally, one should have red wine. One has to make sure to drink the right amount. Matzah. And the 4th one is maror, including during korech, the bitter herbs. Now one should make sure to have the right amount of matzah, and the right amount of wine, the right amount of maror, because it's not just about the flavor of the night. Some people, in it's more secular circles, they come and they go, I had a bite of matzah. I don't like matzah that much. I had a tiny bit of maror. Actually, no, I like lettuce. I'll have a lot of that. And the wine, I don't like it so much. I had a sip. Not about, if you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. 4 cups of wine, there's a specific amount that's called, did you drink the cup of wine? And we're not going to go into it right now, but on our website, again, we have a guide. It's the last bullet point in the guide section, and it's a beautiful guide of exactly how much you need to drink. If you're able to drink this amount, if you can't drink it, and the minimum is this amount. And the same goes for the matzah. Ideally, for Motzei matzah, you have a whole square matzah, if you have square, a half a round if you have round. If you can't, you can have it. You have to know how much you're having, and instead of just having a little bit, and God forbid, not fulfilling the mitzvah. Especially the first night, it's a biblical mitzvah min Torah to eat matzah and maror. Though you have a helpful guide, I think it's on page 18 and 19, but there's also one on the website. Maror and other vegetables should be checked. They should be soaked in water and vegetable soap and agitated and drained, and one should inspect the leaves to make sure there's no bugs under a direct light. Just to finish, this year Chol from Tuesday, April 15th till Friday, April 18th. The 2nd days of Yom Tov is Shabbos, and Sunday, April 20th. That's the last day of Pesach, is when there will be Yizkor, and Pesach finishes Sunday night at 8:32 p.m. Keep in mind that you shouldn't eat the chametz right away because it takes us time to buy it back from the non-Jew, assuming he sells it back to us, which we hope. So therefore, we normally wait till about 9 p.m. to eat any chametz that we sold. I would advise you to check out again our website. We have all these resources that we spoke about today. We also have these apps you can see. I'm going to put a recording of this class. There's a Pesach guideline on exactly what you should do. You can fill in the Chametz sale over there, and everything that will hopefully help you to be able to make the Pesach preparations easy, make them smooth, and that way we come into Pesach happy, as we should be on every Yom Tov. Thank you for listening. I know this was longer than usual. We had to add in the whole Erev Pesach and Shabbos bit, but you should have a Kashering Pesach and a happy Pesach, and may we celebrate in Yerushalayim very speedily in our day. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining.